What up, y'all? So here I want to talk about job security, right? And how you can have a job for life. So in academia, we have this thing called tenure and promotion, right? Um, and like I said in the previous video, I wanted to talk about tenure before I got into the other parts of the application process or the job market process. But I think this is an important thing to touch on because it's something that you have to ask while you're on the job market, right? You got to ask about tenure. You got to ask about promotion, and you got to ask what exactly is required. And I'll get into the kind of answers that I got while I was on the job market because they varied quite a bit depending on the type of institution I was talking to. So that's why I wanted to talk about the differences between tenure at an R1 and an R2 institution, right? Or a PUI or of such, right? Because I think what R1 does is completely different than what all the other places do. And that's important to know. Okay. So what happens here? So let's talk about what R1 wants from tenure. And I'm going to try to keep this video relatively short. Let's see how we do. So with R1, right, you have what their requirements are, but they're very, very vague. They don't really know exactly what is required of you, but they have a kind of idea. So it's very subjective, right? Depending on who's on your tenure committee, depending on who's on your tenure promotion committee, and depending on how much they fucking like you. And it's crazy because they don't exactly tell you what is required. They just said, hey, you need to get a couple of things. Now, I'm gonna say what the general knowledge is, but I will say that it's not the same everywhere. So generally, what they want from you is one to bring in grants, and specifically an R1 or R1. Oh shoot, R1 an RO1. So NIH RO1 grant, which brings in millions of dollars, right? Or million. It's probably like $1 million grant or something of such, right? And then right, an R1 equivalent, which just means it brings in the same amount of money. It's just not through the NIH, right? And it's all about money here. If you haven't figured that out, it's all about the money, right? Because they get indirect costs from those grants, and so those indirect costs funds the university and the department. So why they want those things is so they can continue to bring in money and continue to say, "Hey, look how much money we bring in." But they get a cut of that, right? So they R R1s or R1 institutions are basically your pimps, man. You bringing in money, but they need a cut. They need a cut of that money. So also the second thing that you have to do, right, is publish in top notch journals, right? And we're talking about Cell, Science, and Nature. Those are the three big hitters. And if you're not publishing in those, you're not living. You're not up to the research standard. You're not getting the excellent on your review, right? If you're not publishing in those journals, and that's what they want, right? Because they want to be like, hey, we got the best scientists here. So, but also you could be doing all those things and still not get tenure, and that's kind of the fucked up part of about being at a R1 institution. You could be doing, and if they don't like you, you're not getting it. It's kind of messed up, but it's true. I mean, we saw a very public display of this. Uh, was it Penn State? Is either Penn State or UPenn? The the woman who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize, right? And was it physics or was it chemistry? It was chemistry. For CRISPR, right? And so if I got that wrong, my bad. But she didn't get tenure. Think about that. She got, I think, I don't know if she got promoted, but she didn't get tenure, right? I think she got even demoted, and then they tried to backtrack and be like, "Oh man, we love her. What? She's the best." I was like, now that she got this recognition, oh, you being exposed. So you know what I'm saying? So like you could do all those things. So if one person don't like you, then that could mess up your whole tenure and promotion process. And let me say this, you can get promoted without getting tenure. Remember that. You can get promoted without getting tenure, but that's for a later video, right? You can be an associate professor without having tenure, which is, eh. And tenure is the one thing that gives you job security for pretty much life. I mean, besides, having the biggest money laundering scheme or killing a person, you will have tenure for life. You will have a job for life, right? So then on top of that, now let's shift, right? And let's talk about the other institutions. Let's talk about PUIs. Let's talk about R2 institutions. And they're a little bit more specific with what they require from you, right? It's not this kind of hand wavy behind a veil type situation. They're going to tell you exactly what you need. Like R1, they're not going to tell you exactly what you need. You could be doing amazing and you still not get it. But in R2, right, especially specifically at my institution, if like I said, I'm always speaking from my experiences, my lived experiences, right? So what it is you know they only want from you to one, do undergraduate research, right? They want you to apply for grants. You don't have to get it now. Granted, if you get a grant, that's that's amazing, right? But you apply. Make sure that you're applying. You don't have to receive, but make sure that you're applying, right? Two, make sure that you are publishing papers, but the journal doesn't matter. I mean, obviously they want you to publish in the most highest rated journal that you can. However, the one thing that matters is, especially at places that don't have like graduate programs, they want you to be publishing with undergraduates. And that's the most important thing. So undergraduate research is so important. That's a whole nother thing. So important, right? And that's why a lot of these places emphasize it, right? Because those research experiences pushes them towards like graduate school, and there are scientists and doctors of tomorrow. So we want to make sure that they're, at least in my case, in my lab, I want to make sure that my students are independent, critical thinking, troubleshooting scientists, right? But we're talking about tenure. So two things, right? Two major things, but also you want to make sure that you're still doing great in teaching, because remember that R2, they're paying your salary for teaching. So you want to make sure you're doing a great job teaching, and then you want to make sure that you are doing a great job doing your service. So making sure you have your service obligations filled, right? So those two things, they come, but the major difference here is making sure, or the major difference here is the research grants, right? So at R1, you have to bring in millions. At a R2 or a PUI, you really don't have to bring in any. They would like you to. They would definitely like you to, but you don't really have to bring in, a lot of money, right? And then two is the publication, right? You don't have to publish in high rated journals, and that kind of because publishing in journals, oh man, one, it costs, and two, it's again subjective. Like somebody in inside, and you can be like, hey man, push me through, and they'd be like, yeah, yeah, I got you. And so you got to have the money and the people around you to be able to do that, right? So those are the two things, and that's what the difference is between tenure. And you have to know that going into the job market, because it's so important, because you have to understand, or you have to decide what kind of life you want to live once you get into your once you get into your role, once you get into your position, because you can be spending your time not in the lab just writing grants and writing papers, or you can spend a third of your time doing that, right? But now you're in the lab, you're actually doing research, or you're mentoring students. So it depends on what kind of life you want to live. Now, granted, these are my opinions, my experiences. That's all I can give you. So, hey, take it with a grain of salt. But that's all I have for you guys today. I'm trying to keep it short. I did it. Sorry. But, hey, I'm Dr. Stevens, aka the scientist who lived. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.